Welcome to another episode of What Day Is It? Across the table from me, as always, is the big bearded beast, Fluffy Aaron, Ron, the booty hole puckerer, whatever the hell you want to call him. We appreciate you guys chiming in. This episode is actually rather exciting. We have somebody that's rather important in the animal industry today. In my kind of realm of work, my camel realm, this man is very, very important to anybody in this country that owns a camel at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nick Morrow. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We are good. I appreciate you hopping on, and do tell me if I pronounced your last name wrong.
No, it's perfect. It's just like tomorrow, but without the two in front of it.
That's always what I thought it was, but I've heard a couple people say Morrow, and I was like, I don't know, but
I'll,
man,
I'll respond to anything. You're good.
good. Well, we are glad to have you. This should be a fun one. We'll try not to give you the worst hour of your life on this one. We're just coming into the podcast. We got a whole lot of stuff to talk about, a whole lot of stuff that I want to ask you today as far as the animal world goes. But why don't you come in and just tell us who you are, tell us what you do.
For sure. So I grew up in Utah and I got into the animal industry when I was about 16 years old.
Okay.
I started working at a local farm with horses and cows and sheep and goats. And then it just eventually got a little boring for me. But I started a local horse training business where I traveled around the state of Utah training people's horses.
Terrifying.
And one I know, horses are out of all of these species I work with, I'd say horses give me the most trouble sometimes.
Yeah.
But, one of my horse clients bought some camels, and I was like, "Holy crap, like, these animals are really cool." It's not mainstream. I enjoyed how the camels think about things and process information, and so, eventually, long story short, I turned my horse training business into a multi-species training business where I mostly work with camels, reindeer, water buffalo, yaks, and a few other odd species as well. So since 2019, I've been traveling the entire country working with all these animals at different zoos, private farms, ranches. Um, I've worked with a lot of cool people and I've had a lot of cool experiences. But in the midst of all this training, I also got the bright idea to go to vet school and to, pursue a broader education. And so I had to do my 4-year bachelor's degree at Utah State University. And now I'm just about to start my last year of the 4 years of vet school. So I'm just about to start year 8 of college, which has been
Yeah.
just the most horrible but amazing adventure I've ever embarked on.
It's gonna be
So
incredible to have that doctor in front of your name, man.
I know. I'm the only reason I did all this is to have that title, is so that people like you can call me doctor.
Well, let me just kiss your feet while we're at it, man. It's really cool to see someone like you going through the practice of medicine because in my career I found that there is a huge gap between the people in the private animal world and the people that are just from the medical world, and you're the best of both worlds, man, and you're going to be able to help a lot of people because of that, I think.
Thank you. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to pursue my vet degree is because I did have a lot of clients that didn't have vets that were willing to work with them. Like they would have all of these crazy species, and when something goes wrong, they call their local vet, and their local vet's like, "I'm not touching
Yep.
that. Like, I don't know what to do for that." Or right. Or I don't know, sometimes people don't even get a call back.
Right.
And so I thought that was really disheartening. And so one of my goals as a vet is to help bridge that gap and to service these underserviced, groups of people. And I do plan on getting licensed in multiple states so I can, do it all legally in
Mm-hmm.
the proper way. But yeah, there are a lot of people that need help. And so another one of my goals is to publish resources for all these private animal owners too. So even if I can't fly out to your place and help you, I can at least provide your local vet or you with some helpful medical knowledge.
Absolutely. And that's, again, in my realm of camels and yours and a lot of other people's, like that's going to help so many people immensely. I tell people all the time it's not hard to find a vet, but it's hard to find a good one.
Mm,
Especially when it comes to exotics. Anything that's not your dog or cat, man, it's hard to get people to want to touch.
yeah.
Right. Literally all of them. It's awkward.
I've talked to a lot of vets around the country, and I'll simply ask them. I just say, like, "What is your reservation for working on some of these animals?
Hmm.
Like, what is stopping you?" And the number one answer I get is they're afraid. So if they get a call for this big camel, 1,500 plus pounds, and he's mad because he's in pain, and then they call this vet, they're like, I don't want to get near that camel because I don't want to die. And vets, like they can say no,
Hmm.
they're not forced to work with you. So our job as private animal owners is to make sure our animals are handleable and trained
Yep.
because that will allow more vets to be able to help you. Because no vet's going to put themselves in a really dangerous, situation
No.
for that.
You know,
Mhm.
my I one of the primary vets I use out here, it's called Elkhorn Veterinary Clinic. They're about 45 minutes away. And
Mhm.
they, as far as like the camels go, um they're pretty good on things. But the one nice thing about camels is a lot of the problems they can have is stuff that other animals have. So they're pretty good at taking guesses or whatnot. But the main reason I use Elkhorn is because their doctor, he was TB certified, and I have to get tuberculosis tests yearly when I'm going to county fairs and stuff out of state.
Mm.
And recently, Dr. Entwistle, the one that was TB certified there, he retired. So I was like,
Mm.
shit, I got to find somebody that can run this TB test on the camel, yada yada yada. And um, I reach out to this place called State Line Vet, and I was like, hey, can you guys run TB on a camel? I waited a call back. I got one, and they were like, yeah, that's fine. And I was like, you have to come here to do it. And they were like, we probably won't do that, but why? And I was like, because I have a chute here. I have something to restrain my animal. We can do this, easier. I can keep you safe.
Mm.
And I'm like, I have good camels, but they're babies when it comes to shots and needles. Like, the truth be told, they'll walk a mile through hell for you in a ring of fire, but needle, absolutely no, absolutely not. So they were like, let me talk to the vet, and they called me back and they were like, no, we'll still do it, regardless of what you said, but you got to bring them here. And I was like, I'm not coming to you guys, and that
Mm.
was, you just kind of like rung my bell on that situation. I was like the one time I think like the vet was just like ready to die or something.
Mm.
You want me to get there, tie it to the trailer, and then watch it run in circles? Like that needle hits its armpit, and I'm getting ran over
Mm.
too, no matter how good the camel is, dude. Like,
Totally. Camels have such thick skin. It's pretty comparable to regular cattle skin. And even small needles, most camels absolutely hate them. So I think it's very wise to use a chute or other sort of restraint device because, yeah, no camel's just going to stand there for a needle unless they're really, really good, which that's few and far
right.
between.
Yeah, I get a lot of compliments on my camels when vet comes out and when
Good.
when the vet comes out, and I don't know who out there is putting the bad taste in their mouth in the first place, and they're like, "Oh, yours actually stand there when I have to look at its mouth." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I don't know what the fuck killer camels you met, man, but I mean, I know they're out there, but
Mhm.
I know for a fact you have seen in your work, the lawn ornament camels, the bottle babies, the
Mhm.
ones that kind of run a little rampant." But
Yes.
what I want to address first is I always call you the poop king, man. Like you are the poop king. You're the fecal matter just entrepreneur, dude.
I knew
Like
you that by that name before I knew your real name.
And you're doing fabulous work between training and standard veterinary medicine. But I couldn't put a number on it, but I would say at this point you've probably saved hundreds of camels' lives just by looking at their fecals. You know,
Thank you.
uh, in my opinion, tell me if you think I'm wrong. In my opinion, the number one killer of camels is parasites.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And this was something that I noticed as a trainer several years ago as I would go to all these farms around the country. Um, I I noticed a lot of camels were thin, they were underweight, they had diarrhea, and when I would have this conversation with the owners, they would respond with something like, "Oh, like I deworm my camel every 3 months. I
Hmm.
give him a tube of ivermectin. So I know parasites are under control, but yeah, he just has diarrhea and he's just always thin."
That
But
seems
after I
normal.
heard this so many times, I was like, "Okay, something's not adding up here. Like, we need to get to the bottom of this." So I partnered with my lovely veterinarian mentor, Dr. Charmian Wright,
Hmm.
who lives in Park City, Utah, and she and I together formed a camel parasitology lab. And the reason we wanted to start this lab is because we were seeing so many inconsistencies with other labs around the country.
Yeah.
And there were also a plethora of different fecal tests available for owners to utilize. There's a McMaster's fecal float.
Hmm.
There's just a very generic fecal flotation test that will give you a result like positive or negative, but
Hmm.
won't give you exact numbers.
Right.
Or there's a Wisconsin modified stalls test, which is what we prefer, that will quantify the
Hey,
actual.
Wisconsin.
Yes, hell yeah. But there are also tests that utilize different solutions like zinc sulfate or, sodium-based tests or sugar solution tests. And so there was so much variability. All these camel owners were using all these tests and they were getting all these weird results. But then once these camel owners were receiving those results, they would just like treat if they saw anything in the fecal. And so like no one knew what was happening and all these vets were doing their own thing, which a lot of it was good. But our our current kind of goal and what we're working on is creating a single database in the country for every camel to be tested at, so that way we don't have interlab variability. And now we're coming up with treatment thresholds so that we can say, okay, if your camel has like this number, we should think about treatment. It might not mean that we always treat, because we also want to take into account that camel's clinical signs, if they're having diarrhea or weight loss, or if they're not eating as much as they used to. We have to look at the whole picture. And so once we've analyzed that whole picture and looked at the fecal test results, then we can say, okay, let's treat, and this is a good product that you can use. Because spoiler alert, ivermectin does not work well in camels. And so
I heard other
could
things for
not
people though.
right, for COVID, I guess.
Now,
Yeah,
so you're
so
like the
those are my
forefront of this right now. Like nobody's ever really done this before. This is all next frontier, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Yeah, to my knowledge, it's the largest fecal database for camels in the world. There was another study that was done out of the University of Tennessee, I believe,
Hmm.
where they had a sample size of like 40 camels. But I think so far we're at like 600
Holy shit,
uh,
dude.
and counting. So yeah, it's a really big database, which is great because we're getting a lot of good data. And ultimately, this is just going to help save more camels for
S-
decades to come.
I love it.
So we're talking about 600 camels. I guess first, I've sent you some poop in the past. I've been experimenting on my own, trying to learn it. It fascinates me too. But outside of me, have you had other camel clients from Wisconsin send you in fecals?
Yes. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but we've had plenty
That's
come from
awesome.
Wisconsin. Yeah, we've collected data from I think we're close to like 40
That's
states.
so
And we
cool.
even just checked off Rhode Island the other day, which
Really?
I didn't think I'd ever get any samples from Rhode Island, but I guess there are 5 camels total in that whole state.
What?
But
Wow.
we will test them. So
H-
yeah,
Have you have you had any from either Alaska or Hawaii?
no, but there are camels in Alaska at the Alaska Zoo.
You gotta
So
tell
hopefully
me you need them, man. Just get that
Right.
off the list.
I mean, it's like
yeah.
totally almost a different continent, you know?
Damn near.
That's
Have you had any Canadian camel poop?
No, because no one's been willing to ship from Canada because I think shipping prices would be pretty
Sure.
outrageous. And so if they could find another local lab, they're more likely to just use
You know,
that.
I'm getting my passport. It should be here in a couple days. I could just drive into Canada and get some poop if we know anybody. I'll send you some poop.
You could totally smuggle it in.
They're like, "Sir, what is this in this little bag? It's totally not weed or crack. It's camel poop,
It's
dude."
got a
Like,
biohazard sticker on it, sir.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
funny. So, have you noticed? I'm super interested in, the geography of where the camel poop is coming from. Have you noticed heightened or lessened uh, parasites in different areas of the country?
For sure. So, as a general rule, we're seeing way more parasites like east eastern United States and even central United States, Texas and above, and then far less parasites on the west side
Really?
of the US. So in areas that are wet and humid and
Yeah.
hot, these are your breeding grounds for a lot of our gastrointestinal parasites. Whereas on the west side of the country, where it's more dry, rocky, sandy, whatever, we're finding far less parasites. Some of the cleanest camel farms I test are in California, where like we've been testing them for years and we have found virtually no parasites every time. Whereas like
Wow.
in states like Missouri or Florida, um, or even Wisconsin, a lot of those samples are usually pretty loaded.
Hmm.
But even central US, like Oklahoma is another hot spot, which also Oklahoma is a hot spot for camels in general.
Sure.
But some of the just most loaded camels I've ever seen have been in Oklahoma, where they just have thousands upon thousands of parasites per 1 gram of poop. And so we really got to stay on top of those camels.
Absolutely. In my experience, um, I the last camel I brought in, Newton. He came from Safari Lake Geneva. You've been there. You've trained there for Jay.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
his property it's almost a fucking swampland.
Oh, yeah.
And I brought Newton in, and he at the time I was running standard floats, man. So I thought I was quarantining correctly, and uh yeah, he was fucking loaded. He brought a whole bunch of shit over, and to this day, I'm like, curse that wet fucking swampland, dude. And then I had a
Mhm.
whole like bioterrorist war with parasites with my whole herd since then. And then,
Mhm.
um, yeah, they're so important, man. Like it kind of haunts me that I think there's a few camels that I've had around that I could have saved had I known what I know about parasites today.
Mhm.
Because I come from, Jodan Farms, Bob Meyer, good man, but he was an old head. I come from exactly what you were talking about. It's been 3 months. Get the tuba safeguard. That's exactly what it was, and it's so much deeper than that, man.
We thought we were doing the
It
right thing at
is.
the time, you know?
Yeah, we didn't know any better, and then
Especially for the goats and all that.
yeah, that was the worst part about it. We would get the big bucket of ivermectin for the goats, the stuff that's almost like soap, dude. And we'd put it in the little what the fuck are they? The tubes. What the syringes, sorry. And we'd have to put a syringe in 60 sheep and goats' mouths. It was a pain in the ass. And then to grow up and find that it doesn't fucking work this way, man. And they're living in the soil and they're coming right back. Like it's a whole war. And
Right.
We
It
lost a
really
lot of them.
is.
so what
And
yeah.
sorry, just one more thing. When you talked about quarantining, what a lot of camel owners don't understand either is that these parasites have what we call a pre-patent period.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the period of time in between the ingestion of the infective parasite larva
Mm-hmm.
from the ground to the time when eggs are now visible in the feces and we can see them under a microscope. So every species of parasite has a different pre-patent period. And so some parasites we might find in a fecal sample pretty quick after they ingest them in the first place, whereas others take months and months and months. So if you get a new camel on your property and you run a fecal, that day, it might say it's clean or,
Sure.
very few parasites. But if you wait a while and you do another fecal, they might be loaded because they
Interesting.
may have picked up those parasites a little bit later down the timeline. So that kind of argues the question of okay, how long should we quarantine this animal? And so, does it have to be for months and months and months? No, but it probably should be at least a month, if
Mm-hmm.
not longer. So that way we can test the feces multiple times to see if parasites are going to start showing up.
That is interesting.
Wow.
That made me think of I didn't have this written down, but so you go to treat your camel with whichever medication you choose for whichever parasite. When you treat the animal, say if you do it once and then you repeat in 2 weeks or whatever, is there kind of an incubation period for that medication that will keep parasites off of them for a little while?
Yeah, so some of our dewormers will stay in the body and work for, different periods of time. For example, a lot of camelid owners, and this mostly applies to llamas and alpacas, they like to use injectable ivermectin
Mm-hmm.
every month to prevent M worm, which is meningeal worm. It's also called brain worm.
Sure.
And this ivermectin, if it's given systemically or as an injection, it will continue to work over that month and help prevent brainworm. Um, our other dewormers that treat, gastrointestinal parasites, they have a prolonged period of efficacy where if we were to treat the camel and then test its poop every single day, we might see that number steadily drop over the course of like 7 to 10 days, which is why we recommend retesting a camel about 10 to 14 days after the treatment has been done, because that will give you your most accurate after treatment count because you've allowed time to pass
Okay.
for that medication to work and for those parasites to leave.
Interesting. Now, in your opinion, I know you said ivermectin isn't super great. What is overall is kind of a broad spectrum dewormer? What is the least effective versus the most effective in your opinion?
Yeah, so going along with ivermectin, this is a drug that was created mostly for the strongyle type
Sure.
parasites. So these are your parasites like barber pole or ostertagia. Um, there's a few different strongyle types. Ivermectin was never created for whipworms. It's considered refractory to
Hmm.
whipworms. So if you've tested your camel and they have whipworms and you pull out the ivermectin, it's not labeled for that. It's not really going to work. So our efficacy would be really low. We did an experiment on about 15 camels with this about a year ago, and we used ivermectin on this herd, and it worked for the strongyles even in like 2 or 3 out of the 15, and in some of those camels, their strongyle counts got worse.
Wow.
So it, like, did worse than nothing. So ivermectin is actually never a drug that me and Dr. Wright reach for anymore, unless they're really resistant to other things. Then maybe we'll try ivermectin to see if it
Hmm.
works. But yeah, the only reason I ever buy ivermectin or if I use it will be if I'm treating a horse or something like that, because they're in their own league,
Sure.
but camels are so different. So regarding a good broad spectrum dewormer that does work, I love Safeguard. And so
Sure.
obviously this shouldn't be something that you just reach for and give as a reflex. We have to make sure we're taking the whole picture into account. But I will say that we use a lot of
Oh,
Safeguard.
remind me if I'm
Um,
wrong real quick. Safeguard is fenbendazole?
yep,
Cool.
exactly. Another brand name is Panicure. It's all the same
Sure.
thing.
So,
And
I'm not.
then, and then another drug in that same class, which is albendazole, which so it kind of sounds the same as the fenbendazole,
Mhm.
but albendazole is valbazen, and so we'll sometimes use this as well. But I think these are really good broad spectrum dewormers if they're used at the correct dose, which is not always just the dose on the bottle. You know, you have to consult your vet or, Dr. Wright or me next year or me through Dr. Wright to keep it legal. Yeah, it all has to be, pretty tailored to that camel and their issue.
Over the last maybe 2 years, I had switched to Valbazen because it's actually really cheap. It's fucking cheap. It's like you can get the bottle for like 30 or $40 at Farm and Fleet, and I swear it's killed almost everything I've asked
Oh,
it to. Versus
nice.
like Safeguard, which fenbendazole, in my non-professional doctor opinion, I know it as a really safe drug, and you can even OD on it safely. Where the fenbendazole or valbazen, I could give it the correct dosage, and I swear it just cleans things up, man. Like that stuff has been
Yeah.
a saving grace for me for like a spectrum of the price.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. I really like Valbazen because you don't have to give it every single day for multiple days in a
Mm-hmm.
row. We usually give it like once and then like another dose 2 weeks later. Whereas on the fenbendazole or Safeguard, you have to give that like once a day for 5 days in a row
Right.
at a really high dose. So it's kind of a pain
It is.
to use that. But on the flip side, we have to be careful with the valbazen because it can cause teratogenic
Mm-hmm.
effects, which are birth defects. So on the label, it says you shouldn't use it in the first trimester, but we just prolong it and say you probably shouldn't give it during the whole length of pregnancy if you can help it.
Sure.
And then the animal also has to be 6 months or older to use the valbazen.
Sure.
Uh, and that's just because younger animals don't have as functional of a liver, and so they can get more toxicities if they are given valbazen at too young of an age.
That's super interesting. And I mean, good for me. I got a herd of all just adult geldings. So
makes it
Good,
easier.
now, on
good.
that topic, the rumors constantly fly around about using the same drug over and over again will create a wall for these parasites. They become resistant. How much of that do you find true?
Yeah, so I like to follow some of our national organizations' rules, like the AAEP, which is the American Association of Equine Practitioners. And of course, I know horses aren't camels,
Hmm.
but they have done a lot of work on parasitology as a whole, and they've also sort of gone back and forth between should we be rotating dewormers or should we continue using one until it doesn't work and then move on to another. And according to my knowledge, we're at the point where it would probably be better to not rotate per se, but to continue using one until it fails. But I'd have to go back and look at the exact regulations again to be sure. But I am fairly certain that is the current recommendation. So
Interesting.
what we usually choose to do is test the camel, see what other clinical signs they have, and then just recommend one of our standard treatments. But if that fails, then we might choose something else, or we might choose a combination dewormer where we're actually mixing two dewormers in one and giving that at the same time. And there's a lot of good info on wormx.com, which outlines a lot of treatments that we'll sometimes follow. But yeah, for anybody that is curious or that is, trying to guess, I would definitely go to some of these big national organizations that have put a lot of time and effort into figuring this stuff out. But what we're doing with the camel parasite lab is trying to add to that to see, are camels different and do they have different resistance patterns and things like that.
Now, that's incredibly interesting to hear because, like, again, I come from the old head that was like, every 3 months it was a different drug. He just refused to let them build a resistance. But
Whatever can afford it.
that's also very true. We're broke. Get the small tube. Don't get the cow tube. Get the horse tube.
Kind of leading on to this. Have you ever found a parasite yet that not?
Yes, which is
Yeah.
scary. And it's something that's becoming increasingly common, which is even scarier. So that's why it's more important now more than ever to make sure we're all on the same page about how we're supposed to go about, working through these weird situations. But yeah, there are two camels right now that we're currently working with that they just won't budge on their parasites. Or we might be able to knock them all out 1 month, but then on the next month they're all back.
Which
And so it's like, okay, so now we have to start looking really deeply into management practices.
mhm.
Like, where are these camels living? Where is their feeder located? Or are they on a pasture? Is there a bunch of standing water somewhere? Are they living with a bunch of goats? All these things we have to think about that all tie in. Uh, but it's really scary that some of these dewormers are not touching some of these parasites.
Which parasite species are these?
It's mostly the strongyle type parasites that are the most resistant, and it might be, because of the widespread use of ivermectin.
Mhm.
That's probably what started it because everyone uses ivermectin. So then all these strongyles, which is what ivermectin is labeled for, they just become super strongyles. But then even when we use these other drugs, they're just not budging as well, which is probably due to the overuse of those other drugs as well. But it's hard because people don't realize that once these resistant parasites are on your farm, they're they're there.
Right.
And so you'd have to let your land rest for many years if you wanted those parasites to die. So it's really tough all around.
It's funny that you mentioned that because the parasite or the our property here, we call it the ick. The property has the ick, and Jodan Farms, before it was Rigdon Ranch, before my business was on the property, Jodan was in business for over 40 years, and they hauled animals from e-
Every
every state, man. We took free stuff, junk stuff. It was the old times. So there was lions, tigers, bears, elephants, camel, you name it, just bringing in from everywhere. We have the official ick, man.
yeah.
Like, and the hardest thing I ever fought, which was probably about 3 years ago, was EMAC, which I think
Mm.
is a strongyle.
It's actually a large coccidia
Coccidia.
species.
That's what it is. And that it took me months, man, months and months and months to get rid of. And every veterinarian I called, I can't remember what drug I was looking for, but everyone I called was like, just put Corid in the water. And it didn't do anything. It did nothing.
Mm.
And I think what eventually worked on it was Cydectin. I gave all the camels an oral dose of Cydectin.
Wow, very interesting.
I got
Yeah,
that recommendation from Jason, of course, and as much as I trust him with absolutely anything, I'm very hesitant at doing that stuff. But I've been EMAC free since, man.
that's awesome. Yeah, EMAC is a type of terrible parasite that causes hemorrhagic enteritis, which is a very fancy way of saying all the guts get bloody.
Oh,
And so it can cause lots of blood in the feces. It can cause a lot of internal damage. But this is a
we don't want
coccidia
that.
that we mostly worry about with alpacas and llamas.
Okay.
Um, and so for these people that have camels with EMAC, but they also have llamas and alpacas on the farm, our first recommendation is you should get your llamas and alpacas tested
Mm-hmm.
before we, go anywhere. Because EMAC don't historically cause too many issues for camels, believe it or not.
Okay.
So if a camel has a low count of EMAC, we don't really care
Sure.
because they don't do anything. But if that number starts to creep up, and especially if that camel starts to show signs of them, then we'll treat. But treatment for EMAC is very particular because it is a coccidia. It's not like a regular parasite.
Mm-hmm.
So our three primary drugs that we use are Corid, Albon, or Ponazaril. But I will say Corid has the lowest efficacy rate. You know, we might eliminate EMAC 10% of the time, and that's just a random number I threw out. It's low. Whereas Albon might get rid of it 25% of the time. Again, just a random number. But then Panazaril, which is also Marquis, which is the drug that will treat horses for EPM, which maybe you've heard of that.
Sure.
But it's a really expensive medication unless you get it compounded through another pharmacy.
Mhm.
But that drug has like a 99% efficacy against
Oh,
EMAC.
wow.
So we now just use Panazaril mostly for EMAC. If the Cydectin worked, I don't want to give you false hope, but Cydectin wouldn't do anything for EMAC.
Okay.
So my guess is that due to the low shedding nature of EMAC, they maybe just disappeared for a minute, but they'll probably come back.
Sure.
So just be very vigilant with that. But yeah,
I
I
could be wrong on what I used at the time. Like I said, this was also like 3 years ago, but I remember using that. So yeah,
it's
absolutely. I take the advice on it. I'll keep my eye out for it.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Cydectin for other things though, and so maybe you truly used it, but maybe it was for something else. I don't
I
know,
don't
but
know.
it's a really good drug that we'll use in some cases of
Sure.
strongyles.
I was definitely like I was scared to give it out just due to the smell of it. It's
It's like
literal,
paint.
yes, 100% nail polish remover, just absolutely, disgusting. I was like, I wouldn't feed this to my enemies. Now I'm gonna stuff it down a camel's throat with a 60 mil syringe. Like, yeah.
And this is something that we have gotten concern about because it is a
Mm-hmm.
pour-on that we recommend giving it orally.
Yep.
And so people say, okay, well, aren't there different carriers in this drug? And it's not designed to go oral, like it's going to hurt them. But this was actually a technique that was established by a professor at Texas A&M. And
Really
so he was the first one to say, hey, like we should try using this poron as an oral drug. And then there was another exotic animal vet in Texas that was using it. And so we kind of adopted it from them and started using it, with caution at first. But to date, we've used it and recommended it on hundreds of camels, and we haven't seen any ill effects from it. So, still definitely use it with caution, but to our knowledge, even though it smells rank and it is rank, safe to go orally.
Here's one. What's the most dangerous dewormer for camels?
That would be levamisole.
I don't know if
This
I've
is
heard
like
of that
the
one.
Yeah, it's the atomic bomb of dewormers. So it's kind of what we look for last. So if you're on a farm with a lot of resistant parasites and we've tried all these things, then we reach for that levamisole last, and then we cross our fingers and hope it works and doesn't hurt the animal in any way.
What are kind of the bad effects of levamisole? What does it cause?
Yeah, so it mostly causes intense salivation, a lot of urination, a lot of defecation. It's our SLUD signs, SLUD, salivation, lacrimation, urination, and defecation. So any issues with any of those systems. But it
Interesting.
has a very narrow margin of safety. So you have
Hmm.
to like take your camel to a scale and weigh him or her and get a perfectly accurate weight and then dose them accordingly and make sure they get every drop.
That's
Um,
Yeah.
right,
And then they spit it back up at you 5 seconds later, and
yeah.
then you're like, "Fuck, it's gone, dude."
exactly. Yeah,
I
but it's yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that we have a scale here for our camels. How many facilities do you see that actually have one?
I could maybe count on one hand how many facilities have their own scale. A lot of my clients just have to utilize a local feed store,
Mm-hmm.
scrap yard, port of entry, truck stop, any of
Yeah.
these other places that might have big scales. But yeah, I maybe have two, three, or four clients that actually have their own scale. So good job.
Well, it started because I took my camels to the local pilot, and I had to back off the scale and back on and a million, like it was just the fucking runaround. And I was like, fuck it, I'm buying a scale. And I bought one of them, build your own livestock scales for $400 or whatever. It ended up costing me probably about like $800-900 because I had my welder man put together the heaviest duty fucking scale you've ever seen, and it's fucking great. I have to recalibrate it from time to time, but I just use a 50-pound grain bag because we already know what it weighs.
Oh, nice.
So
Nice.
it's
That's
been
smart.
super cool, and it gives me an opportunity to weigh not just the camels, but anything. If my kangaroo's sick, I weigh the crate, then put the kangaroo in the crate and put them on it. Every winter or spring when the capybaras move inside or out, they get a weight check. Like it's been very helpful around here for giving
Perfect.
medications in general. And then for all my smaller critters, I just use a baby scale.
Smart.
But it's definitely
Uh,
been pretty cool. Then the vets don't have to argue over medication dosages, and depending on what I'm giving, I feel a little lenient. Like Safeguard, I don't give a shit if I'm over at all. But I'm like as many times as I've used the Valbazin, I'm still not 100% comfortable with it. What would you say your lenience on that drug is, giving a little over?
if the camel is not pregnant and over 6 months of age, um, I mean, I would always recommend weighing
Mm-hmm.
them, but if you can't, I don't really push it that
Sure.
hard. So it's still pretty safe. Unfortunately, I've gotten plenty of phone calls, Dr. Wright included, since we work together, of clients that are like, "Oh my gosh, like I read your message wrong and I accidentally gave them like 4 times what you told
Woo!
me to." So,
Oh no!
uh, I mean, I even had another client. Oh, what did she
Oh,
give? It was
fuck.
like 50 times the dose of
Shut the
Oh
fuck
something,
my
up.
god.
and and that camel lived. So
Oh,
they're like, yeah, a lot of these drugs are safe, but it does not mean that we should be, too lazy. We still got to try to stick to the book as best we
right.
can.
On the topic of, parasites, what do you think of biowerma?
Yeah, this was a product that was originally developed for Homunculus contortus, which are barber pole.
Mm-hmm.
So biowerma is a product that you can spread out on your land. Or actually, is this the oral
The
product that the animals
topical. Yep,
eat?
it's like the green powder.
Yes, there we go. Yeah, so this was it was mostly developed for small ruminants, so a lot of sheep and goats mostly. It's approved against barber pole, so it's good, but since camels don't really get barber pole
Okay.
specifically, it might not work great for them. Because camels usually get the other types of those strongyle type
Mm-hmm.
parasites, like the trichostrongyles, or other strongyles like that, but not really barber pole,
Interesting.
although they certainly can. So, as far as like what you can use to help your animals, if you want to use biowarma, me and Dr. Wright have recommended that to some people, but we haven't seen any miracles from it per se.
I have a bucket in my barn. I've honestly probably had it for about a year, and I've never touched it. And the reason being is, so in my head, the bioworma, they eat it, and the way they kind of describe it is your camel poops, your animal poops, and it creates kind of like an unseen net around the poop, which stops the parasites from going back into the dirt. And why I never used it is because like that's cool, but it sounds like to me it would really only help a clean property because the camel pen's clean, but like if the pigs down the way still have fucking whipworm or roundworm or whatever, just random bullshit, is it really going to help?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think more research has to be done and more people have to try it. But another one of my biggest pet peeves is when people start using a new
Mm-hmm.
product and they say, "It works. Like this stuff is awesome. Everybody needs to use it." And I'll be like, "Okay, cool. Like, can you send me some of the fecal test results?" And they're like, "Oh, we actually don't test."
Well, how
I'm
the fuck
like,
do you
"Then
know it
how do
works?
you know it works?" But you would be surprised, I get this all the time, especially with some of the more homeopathic people that use herbs and essential oils and stuff. And they're like, I use these essential oils to help whipworms and it works. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, can you send me some of your data? And they're like, oh, like we don't test or anything, but I just know it works. So yeah, I'm a man of science. I'm a man of seeing
Hmm.
numbers and looking at the big picture. And so if you have a method that works, that's
Hmm.
great, but you have to truly know it works and you have to be able to prove it to be able to change my mind.
Absolutely. Do you have this book right here, the Field Manual of Camel Diseases?
I actually don't. I mean, I have several camel textbooks, but I do not have that
There's
one.
I'm not gonna try and sift through the 300 pages in this thing right now, but there's a few plant based dewormers in this book that are from overseas for from the Middle
Mm,
East, because it's a dromedary book. Um,
mhm.
and I've always been intrigued on trying to order the seeds and growing them, throwing them in a greenhouse and seeing if they worked, man. I don't have the time to try it, but have you seen anybody, with the homeopathic ways, like plants and whatever? Have you seen anybody do it and it work?
So a few people come to mind. There was one gal I was working with who had some camels, and they were loaded with
Hmm.
strongyles, and she really wanted to use some of her more natural, protocols. And I said, yeah, go for it. Like, as long as you get them tested, like, you do whatever you want, and I would be happy to help kind of facilitate this research. And so I was really excited, but yeah, it didn't touch them. Like, it was pretty much the same numbers, but I don't know the exact protocol she used. But then on the flip side, there's another person, and her camel has always been, pretty
Hmm.
clean, and she uses natural stuff. So it's hard to say if her natural stuff is what's keeping that camel clean, or if that camel is clean anyway.
Sure.
And so that's something that you can't really prove. We would have to artificially infect this camel with parasites and then see if that product worked. So, and that's another one of my pet peeves is what you did truly the reason why they're clean,
Yeah.
or is it a coincidence, or were they gonna be clean
You
anyways? So to answer your question, I have yet to see something that truly works, but I'm all open and I'm happy to test, and we can see whatever you do works.
Well, maybe I'll conduct my little study in the future if I have
Good.
time and order these seeds and grow them. But I think the biggest complication that I would run into is I would imagine overseas the parasites are much, much different than here. So
Mhm.
who knows? Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. I don't
It's
know
a
if I'll
lot
ever find the
drier, a lot
time.
hotter,
Right, it's a
big difference.
whole different world. Um, so who knows if it'll work? Who knows if I'll ever even get around to ordering the seeds?
Well, if you
But
do, we got about a green.
true that.
New
Uh,
hobby.
God, I don't have time to wear that many hats, dude. So, Nick, you had before we started, you grabbed some textbooks. Was there anything you wanted to talk about with those guys, or did you just grab them for just in case?
No, I'm using them as a stand for my computer. It's my, equine internal medicine textbook and my camel conference textbook,
That's fun.
but, no,
That's funny.
nothing from them I need to show
Good.
you.
Good. That's funny. So, you have a vast history with equine. I always tell people once you go camel, you can't go back to horses.
Why wouldn't you want to?
How often do you still see horses?
I see horses on a regular
Okay.
basis just because they're the most common
Hmm.
animal in my area. Um, but just for example, I made a Facebook post last week of a situation where I tied a camel up and he got his leg, stuck over the rope. But what's cool and what I wanted to illustrate too is if I would have just left this camel alone, he probably would have figured it out and calmed down and got his leg unstuck and then eventually, stand there
Hmm.
patiently. But a horse, once they get tangled and once they pull back, they'll pull back until their freaking leg
Yeah.
snaps. They'll pull back with such force and energy, and they'll panic and they'll get tangled even more. And then they're traumatized for life. And so this is something I love about camels is their ability to reason through situations. Um, they tend to think first and act later, whereas horses will act first and think later.
You are
Or to not think
And
at all.
so
preaching to the choir, man.
yeah,
Preaching to the
it's very
choir.
true. So even though I love horses, I give them a lot of credit because they're the species that gave me my start in animal
Hmm.
training. It's very true that I think camels are way better. And once you truly learn how to handle and understand camel behavior, it makes horses just seem so childish and
Yes.
it's just not worth your time to fool around with a horse if you have a
It's
camel.
a whole different world, man. And people ask me this, all the time, like in the realm of questions of like why camel and not horse. And I try to explain this to people, but it's hard because horses have become such a part of American culture where camels haven't. And at the moment we have somewhere between 7 to maybe 9, 10,000 camels in the United States. I know a lot of people go more on the 7,000 side, but we don't have the final answer. And then we have somewhere between 6 to 8 million horses here. I think that's including ponies. And that number, I don't know if a lot of people understand how drastic that number is. That's a very different number. 7 to 10,000 versus 6 to 8 million. Like, dude, that's crazy.
Should be reversed.
It should be. Camels are fucking awesome, and they're so lenient and caring and loving, and they just want to hang out with you. And
No,
and Nick, I tell people all the time, man, if you want to kill somebody, have them stand next to a horse and then drop a napkin in front of the horse. Like, it's over with. It's game. Horses are just, they're scared of everything that they don't understand. And I like that you said that the camels think first, because it's true. I've seen it 1,000,001 times, man. They're such intelligent beings, man. Would
Mhm.
yeah.
I really love training camels too because you can get from A to B in a lot
Mm-hmm.
shorter, time. So like if I fly out to, somebody's place to work with their horse, I'm mostly going to be training the owner, things to do continually with that horse for many years to come to get that horse finished. Or like if we're doing any, saddle training type work on a horse, like I might do the first ride on a horse, but you're going to have to do the next 100 to 200 to make that horse,
Right.
good. Whereas when I fly out to work with a camel, we're like, okay, let's take 3 days and get this camel trained start to finish. We'll do all the ride training, teach it how to drive. We'll teach it to lay down, halter training, trailer loading, pick up its feet for nail trimming. Like all this can be accomplished in just a few days. And so it's really cool to just see how well they learn and they're extremely intelligent, but it also really helps the owner out to see things happen from start to finish. And then they can continue with their training. But it's more of a quality over quantity thing with camels. So I tell my clients, you don't have to be out there with your camel every single day working with them. But if you go out there once a week or twice a month, I think that's great as long as you're making your time with your camel
Sure.
count.
training camels
And
is so much harder with the camel. Actually, training camels. Notice that.
Absolutely.
very
'Cause
true.
when you leave, you have to trust that the people are going to continue what they taught them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got another question for you. How many camels train versus horses?
That's a great question. Um, At this point, I've probably trained more camels, which is cool to
Heck yeah.
say, even though I am like mostly known for being a camel trainer. But there are still, as you mentioned, there are way more horses than camels as a whole. When I'm in Utah, which is my home state normally, I end up working with a lot more horses just because I'm local and I can go from one horse farm to the next in 5 minutes. Whereas when I train camels, I'm mostly flying somewhere. But I would say at this point, I probably have trained more camels than
That's
horses,
awesome.
which is
Do you have
cool.
a number, like a number for
Probably,
A
huh,
lot.
quite a
The
bit?
the
So
sigh sounds like a
yeah.
lot.
I would
Sounds like your
say
back hurts.
150, 200
Sure.
plus.
That's a lot
Wow.
of
Okay,
camels,
that's
man.
impressive.
When I initially had I guess met you is when I drove to Utah to pick up Stormy. And at that time, I didn't know who the hell you were. You didn't know who the hell I was. And I mean, I wasn't even running my own company. So I remember I came into an office, there was some paperwork. We threw the camel in the trailer and we were out of there. And I, I do feel kind of arrogant, not like talking to you more, finding out more about the camel, about the facility, this, and that. I just got off a 40-hour drive and I was like, get the fucking camel in the trailer, we're out of here, And it was kind of like intriguing to find out again who you were like all these years later. And I was like, wow, it was really a missed opportunity, to shake the man's hand. I picked up a
Oh,
camel and didn't shake the fucking man's hand, dude.
That was
Like,
pretty dumb.
I was probably like 19 years old, 20 years old, but like, man, that was ignorant and selfish and just the poor behavior.
Well, to be fair,
Dude,
Shane's
it was a long time ago.
Shane's kind
Absolutely.
of a crabby bitch driving, so
Dude. Dude, Nick, when I took that
video
drive,
pros.
you still there, Nick?
Yes, I am now, but it did cut out for maybe 20 seconds of like a minute
Yeah, your
ago.
videos froze for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it won't. Well, maybe we'll just get a stand of you smiling. Whatever. When I picked up Stormy, the worst part of that drive was through the mountains. And it was like 30, 40 mile per hour snow drifts in the mountains. I had an empty aluminum stock trailer with slots on the slides. So, dude, the wind was everywhere. I was driving through the mountains at like 30, 40 miles an hour like a grandpa with semi trucks passing me, dude. It was so awful. And I remember getting out of the mountains on the gas tank was on basically E. And they're right out of the mountains. I was like, fuck yeah, there's a gas station, man. And it was a gas station with two pumps, little mom and pop town, looked like there would be dust bunnies running around, man. And it was so small, the town was so small. I pulled in to the diesel pump and my trailer was taking up both lanes on the road. It was like, I need fuel. This is crazy, man. And I think your stop wasn't too far from that. But I was
Really?
so scared to run out of fuel in the mountains, dude. And it was cold out, man. It wasn't like super, super nice. And I actually did have a can of diesel in the trailer if I needed it, but I didn't want to use the emergency can.
That gets scary.
That was the worst drive of my life to this day, and I've gone to California and back. Like just the snow drifts alone, and the semi truck drivers don't give a fuck. Like there's a boom, 90 miles an hour past you. I don't give a shit why you going slow. My truck's heavier than yours. Like it's over.
Especially with an empty
Oh,
trailer. That's scary.
But yeah, all these years later, it was really cool to connect with you and to kind of realize how important of a figure you are. And these poop studies are just fucking amazing, man. I never thought that I would be so fascinated with shit, literal shit,
dude, me neither.
But
And my lab started in my basement, like just in a room in the basement. I just had shit everywhere and had my microscope and centrifuge and all these other supplies. And then it just evolved and grew. And I've since had to hire like 5 laboratory
holy shit.
technicians to help
Wow.
me, with everything. So since I'm in vet school now and I'm very preoccupied, me and Dr. Wright have hired out a lot of our actual fecal testing. And so Dr. Wright is still here with me, and we process the results and we validate everything, and make sure it's all good. But I'm not physically the one actually doing the fecal testing anymore, which took a lot of weight off my
Mhm.
shoulders, but I'm happy I can still be involved and all
That's
that.
very awesome, man. It's especially like knowing that somebody is still at least reviewing the fecals. That's very nice to know. Now, how many fecals do you think you guys are getting in a month or a day?
Yeah, so our current year to date number, just since January 1st, and today's April 15th, we've done about
Whew,
270.
Wow.
So
that's a lot of
it's
poop, dude.
for right. So for the relatively, few camels in our country, it's a pretty significant number. But that is with camels alone, but we also test other species now too. So maybe in total, our number is quite a bit higher. But as far as camels, we're at about
That's a
270.
lot.
But in the last few years, since we've been doing this, we have done probably like 2,500 fecal tests. So yeah, quite a bit.
Dude, hats off to you, man.
You really like
Your starting laboratory just makes me think of mine. I can see my stuff from here. It's just a little Chinese built centrifuge from Amazon, with my little
Mhm.
microscope across the table, and it does me well. But I'm a vet tech as well. I've been for like 3 years. No certification. I'm not like nothing fancy, but like I go to the clinic and we got this $4,000 microscope and this $2,000 centrifuge, and I'm like, I don't know how much I would need this shit to do what I'm doing, but it sure is nice. Like it works.
Totally. I mean, in my opinion, it's not so much about the fanciness of your equipment. It's mostly about your eyes and can you recognize those parasite eggs under the
Sure.
microscope? And I think that's the hardest part for people is they buy all the equipment to run fecals themselves. And then they are actually looking at it under the microscope and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed." And so then they just say, "Yeah, I'll just go back to using your lab because I can't figure it out." But for the few, really dedicated people, I'm more than happy to help teach you how to do these things, uh, as long as you're just doing them on your own animals, because we have to keep things legal. So,
Yeah.
like me as a fourth year vet student, I can't really do any of this on my own. I need to be working with Dr. Wright, who has the license. But if another, just random Joe Schmo were to start doing fecals for someone, like they could get into some legal
Yeah.
trouble if someone reported them. So we just have to be
Yeah,
careful with that.
which I know I've talked to you about, a little bit, because I've definitely thought about like, maybe I can make some local chump change on it and shit. And
Yeah,
I uh I still run fecals for people, but it's like for friends, like Fluffy across the fucking table here. I run a fecal on his dog all the time. His dog is a fucking dump, you
he's
nice.
know.
broken.
Like, so I'll do it with friends, but so I've definitely, I took your advice and kind of let it go because it's not worth all the legalities and getting in trouble and shit like that. And I'm still learning. And, on the side of that note as well, I really, appreciate you picking up my texts when I have questions about I don't recognize this or what the fuck is this, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's just pollen, just simple shit, man. I appreciate you being just so caring about everybody in the community, man.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's really like a nice it's a nice break as I'm, going through vet school because if I'm just like in class and studying all day every day, like I go insane. So when people text me with random camel questions, like I get excited and I love responding to them because it allows me to think about other things for a minute or two. So yeah, it's really never a bother to text or message. You can keep doing that.
Awesome. Do you have any camel horror stories? Like, have you met any camels that you're afraid of or just did some crazy shit?
I've been bit a few times, like really hard to the point where like teeth went, damn near through my hand.
Ooh.
And it was it was a bull
Of
camel
course.
that, did that. He just yeah, it was horrible. And I was so scared and I was with another trainer and I looked at her and I just said help. Like that's the only word I could get out because when I like think about getting bit like by an animal, it's just like, "Oh, okay, sure, like, it might hurt, like, when they puncture you," but what I didn't realize is that, like, when a camel bites you, there is immense force behind their
Sure.
jaw. Like, they can crush bone with their
Mm-hmm.
roots. So, it was that pressure that really caught me off guard, and, like, I always think I'm big and tough and I could fight them off, but it was such a strong bite, like, I knew there was nothing I could do to make him let go.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hopeful that he would just, like, bite and let go, but no, he held on to me, and it was kind of an ordeal, but it traumatized me for many months, and so I have a camel that lives in Utah. He lives with another group of camels right now, But I was even scared to go see him after I was bit by this other bull camel. Like, I wouldn't let camels get within 10 feet of me for a long
Sure.
time because this camel that bit me, it was unprovoked. Like, he was doing perfectly fine. And then just like a snake, he was on me. And so I just lost trust in camels after that experience, but thankfully over the years, I'm now fine and I'm not scared any I'm not scared anymore because like you said at the beginning, you know, camels are like puppies. They love to hang out with you. They're usually very, very nice, but every once in a while you get a camel that maybe shouldn't be alive anymore.
Whew. I mean,
I can agree with you on that one.
that's the dark way to put it, man. But there's some with all species. There's some that out there that you don't find reasoning with, you know,
And every horse.
and every horse. Ah, that's funny, man. Now outside of camels, if that is the answer, what's your favorite animal to work with? Is it camels?
It is
My man.
camels.
I kind of figured through all this.
You know, another species, I've only worked with 2 of them ever, so it's not like I have a ton of experience, but a species that I find so fascinating are
Oh,
moose. And so every year I go to Alaska and I work for this place called the Williams Reindeer Farm, and I have done some work with a couple of their moose there. And it's just absolutely crazy just how they think and how they act and all of the different sounds they make. Like, it's very foreign to me. But over the years, as I've worked with a couple of these moose, I've just really learned to like them. Super
now, do they
fascinating.
remind you of a camel? Because they kind of remind they got a little lump, right? Kind of remind me of a little bit of where with them, but a little crazier.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to explain them in one word, it would be emotional. Like, it's like if you look at them wrong, their ears go down and their eyes get heavy, and they make this, like, whimpering, crying sound, and so, like, the whole time I was working with these moose, I was constantly questioning, like, "Am I doing too much, or am I going too hard, or, like, should I give them a break?" Like, I was really confused at the beginning as to what these moose could tolerate. Uh, because other species, you know, camels included, they can
Oh
tolerate
yeah.
quite a bit, you know, like they can go all day long with the camel training and they're perfectly
Hmm.
fine. But with these moose, like I was just confused half the time. But I just think they're so cool and you can reason with them, you know, more than I would think. Like I I ended up wearing gloves because I wasn't sure just how hard they were going to pull against me when I was halter training. But it turns out, like, they're really not as strong as you would think they are. I mean, yes, moose are incredibly strong, but these 2 moose I was working with weren't strong enough to, like, be able to pull away from me, you know? So, eventually, I could take the gloves off like I normally train and just train them like I would any other
There are
animal.
so many things I could say to this, but the only thing that comes to my mind, or the first thing that comes to my mind, is who the fuck has a moose?
Oh,
Like, what the fuck?
I want to just say how jealous I am that you get to get that close to a moose. Because like, I want a moose. I love them. They're one of the coolest animals besides camels.
That is
So
incredible. Like,
yeah, it's this place in Alaska
of
called the
course it
Williams
is. Yeah.
Reindeer Farm, and they have a partnership with Alaska Fish and
Hmm.
Game to where if a baby moose is abandoned or like if the
Mm.
mom gets hit by a car or in this particular case a couple years ago this calf kind of fell off a ridge and the mom wasn't able to get back to it and then when they rescued this calf they put it back up on top but mom was like so long gone so they just ended up taking the
Hmm.
baby and then they get rehabbed at this really cool facility but since they are rehabbed and learn to trust humans and like humans they're not good candidates for release back into the wild. So they just end up keeping them there for the remainder of
Yeah,
their
if I find
lives.
one out in the wild that like me, I'm taking.
So if I go, can I have a moose ride? Like,
Maybe saddle training will come in the
that'd be so
future, but it
badass.
hasn't
That would be
happened yet.
so badass, man. You know,
Oh my god.
I'll have to find some photos for you, man. I have some really cool photos you'd probably love to see. Actually, are you still coming to Safari Lake Geneva this summer?
I don't get like an official summer break off this year for vet school. I just go straight into my fourth
Gotcha.
year
Well,
coming up. But he is on my wait list
okay.
right now, so I am planning on
Well,
making it out to his place as soon as I
whenever you
can.
make it there, stop by. I'm right down the road, but I'll show you pictures for now. We have these old school. One was an elephant saddle. One was a camel saddle, and you would fucking crack up seeing them. They're picnic table
Little
saddles.
picnic table.
It's a picnic table that sits on top of a camel.
No
I've never
way.
used one. I've actually been thinking about tacking it up and throwing it on a camel, but they were an old Jodan Farms design, and you sit on it
Really?
like a picnic table and ride around on your
Hmm.
camel. It is the most unsafe looking thing on the planet.
Mm.
It's really, really, really
Straight up the
interesting though.
70s, 60s, like terrifying.
I'll have to send you some photos
That's
of it. We got a
cool.
bunch of old elephant howdies and the picnic table saddles sitting up in our barn here yet. It's just history, so we won't get rid of it. But I just, from like
That's
a
neat.
trainer's mind, it would probably be interesting for a lot of people to see shit like that. It's one-on-one design, and there's a reason that it's not in use today.
Feel with that ankle.
That's really fascinating.
um, I have a pretty unique saddle here myself. The guy that makes them, his name is Mike. Uh, our carnival saddles here, they're a little bit different with their shoulder padding, and there's a little bit different shit that came out of Jodan Farms. They're not as simple as the standard carnival saddle, but yeah, there's been some weird shit to come out of this place. But I'll have to send you pictures of that one. It's really stupid looking.
Please do. That's
But also, yeah, if you do make it over there, please stop by. I'll buy you
I'd love to
lunch.
meet you, man.
yeah, hell
Absolutely.
yeah.
Now, you have mentioned your colleague a little bit, Dr. Wright. How did you end up, kind of coming under her?
That's a really good question. So when I first started with camels in 2018 or so, um, we really needed to get this young male camel castrated because he was a bottle
The
baby.
worst.
He was in an extremely heightened, tons of
Hmm.
testosterone. He was like out to kill people. And so even though he was really young, which we usually don't like to castrate camels until at least
Hmm.
2, but I think he was like 18 months or
Wow.
somewhere, but we just needed to get him cut ASAP because he was gonna
Sure.
kill someone. So, there's a camel vet in Utah that was about 45 minutes away from where this little bull camel was, and so we scheduled an appointment to see her, and she's owned camels before. She started the first free reining camel trekking business in the whole Western
Wow.
Hemisphere. She's such a badass. She used to own camels of her own. She's gone overseas to learn more about camel medicine. So this whole time, like I knew I had to get involved with her if I wanted to make it in the camel vet
Sure.
world. And so we take the bull camel up to her place. This is the first time I'm gonna meet her, and I had just started my undergraduate degree at Utah State, so I'm just this little college freshman. And after the castration procedure, I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, Dr. Wright, like I'm a freshman at Utah State. Like I want to be a vet." And she didn't give me the time of day. Like still joke with her about this to this day because she basically, told me to fuck off. And so, sadly, I left her place and I went back home and I was like, darn, like that was my shot to, really get into camel vet medicine and I blew it. And like, so I just had to think about ways that I could get back in with her. And over time, I just kept messaging her more and more. And, sometimes there would be several days between replies. And I was like, oh, she hates me.
Badger
Like,
until
there's
he
no way.
accepts.
But I just like kept asking her questions and then ultimately I had scheduled another camel's castration with her and we talked and had a much better conversation and eventually like I totally won her over and she took me under her wing And together we have traveled to many places on work and on non-work stuff. And she's been the most amazing mentor I could ever ask her. But what's funny is that if you ask her how we met, her story's different. And she denies that she rejected me that first time.
Women.
So I about that, but she's amazing, and I'm so glad that I have her on my side now because she's given me so many opportunities, and as we've mentioned, she's truly at the head of this camel
Hmm.
parasitology thing, But yeah, so that's how we met, and ultimately, I'll be going to work with her after I graduate vet school next year. So it'll be her and I working at her practice. It's called Mountain Horse Medical, and then eventually once she slows down and starts traveling the world, I'll mostly be working
Hmm.
there and doing my
Awesome.
thing.
That is awesome, man. When she starts traveling the world, we know that the camel health aspect is in good hands, man. That's
Absolutely.
super,
Thank you.
super awesome. And it's cool that, you got the opportunity to kind of get under her, because through all of my years in with camels, that's one of the names I've heard frequently. There's probably 4 or 5 names that I hear all the time when they're talking camels, man. And hey, you're one of them now, man. So you made it.
Yep.
Like
Thank
it's
you.
it's Doug, Gil, Dr. Wright, Nick. There's Jason, Terry. Oh, well, I wasn't getting into trainers. I wasn't
That's fair. That's
they
fair.
just train,
Yeah.
And then there's one Valerie. There's a few names that you can't talk camels and not bring up. It's almost disrespectful, man. It's
Thank
it's
you.
badass the work we do, and it's cool having these conversations with guys like you, because it's all like I have other animals, but my other animals are a side quest. My life revolves around the camels, so it's so cool to talk camels with somebody that loves the fucking camels.
It's rare to find,
Mhm.
for me to find somebody that knows way more about camels than I could ever imagine.
Right, I've been working camels myself for about a decade now, so I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the fucking camel guy, but like I'm a nobody compared to these people, like you guys you have so fucking much. And it's funny. Right, we feel small. It's funny too, because like locally, like our friends and family, they look at us like we're the fucking camel gods, but like we're not.
And
I
you
mean,
are.
maybe to like Racine County, but like there's people like Terry and Jason that train on a national level. Well, you as well, but I'm kind of putting you at like a medical standpoint here, and we have people like you keeping everyone's camels alive in the nation. Like yeah, I can go grab a camel and train it. That's all cool, but like you guys are the camel heroes, man.
Yeah.
It's so fucking cool, dude. It's so goddamn cool.
Thank you. But it's people like you guys that are really like at the foundation of camels in this country. Like it's awesome if I can educate people, but it's the people that work with the public on a daily basis and that do all these outreach things that are truly going to educate the country about
That's fair.
camels. And I feel like this is more important now, perhaps more than ever, that we educate people on
Yeah.
camels with their classification and with their, are they livestock versus exotic
Mm-hmm.
animals, and some of the things that are happening now may impact what happens with our camels in the future.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like it's your work that is
Well,
extremely important, and then I can just be here to help when I
that's why we
can.
got the camel man himself sitting across the table from me
Well,
on TikTok.
I appreciate that, man. That feels good to hear. And man, working with the general public, anybody that does it with animals, or even if you work at fucking McDonald's, we all know that working with the general public is fucking awful,
Nightmare.
man. It's a nightmare. And the most disheartening thing to me when I reopened the zoo on this property, Nick, I offered two types of encounters. I offered a capybara encounter and I offered a camel encounter. And for the first entire year of the zoo, not a single camel encounter was booked. And I was like, what the
Really?
fuck, man? So I ended up, I didn't even plan on opening the zoo. I was just doing camel stuff. So I bought the capybaras for me because I always wanted a capybara. I'm one of them people. And then I started getting other stuff. I got the llamas, alpacas, the lemurs, the pigs, the the kangaroos, whatever. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to offer a reasonably priced tour to meet all of the animals. And throughout the tour, the camels are kind of in the middle of it. And that's where I spend the most time. One, because that's, well, what I know the most about. But B, when people end up meeting camels, they have no idea how fascinated they're going to be by them. They're so infatuated by them. They really are the coolest fucking thing on the planet. I mean, capybaras are cute and cuddly and stupid, but like, can they fucking cross the desert with no food and water for weeks on, like the camels are one of a kind animal, man.
My fat ass. I would love to, but I can't.
No, you're so right. I think camels are so fascinating because of how truly adaptable they are. It
Yes.
doesn't matter what kind of weather you throw them in, they'll figure it out. They're so efficient nutritionally, they can pull nutrients out of the worst
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And they're just fun to
Yes.
watch, and how their lips move and their long eyelashes and their ears twittering.
Happy.
I just think they're so fascinating. Yeah, the happy feet.
You know what was cool, man? A couple of weeks ago, you had posted a picture of a camel's eyeball. That was fucking astounding. Fluffy, you just got Facebook back, so I'll have to show you this photo. He had picture. He had. Did you take that photo yourself? What phone do
I
you
did.
have?
Just like an
Fuck
iPhone
But man,
12, 13.
that photo was incredible. So it's a photo, it's an up close photo of a camel's eyeball. And I'll have to show you the post. He made this incredibly elaborate post on essentially of why camels have built in sunglasses. And it is just fucking immaculate. And the photo you took, Nick, it looked like a desert. And it's stunning and beautiful. And these camels, they're beautiful inside and out, man. Fluffy's got to be happy because he always yells at me that we don't talk about camels enough on the Camel Podcast.
Well, I'm gonna request to be your friend, I think, after the podcast. So please let me.
Perfect.
But that was so cool, and people they don't understand how much they can be put anywhere on the planet and not only survive, but they can thrive off of dog shit, man. They can thrive on anything. They have built-in sand and snowshoes. They can withstand almost any temperature that this planet has to offer. They have multiple sets of eyelids, the incredible double set of eyelashes, the built-in sunglasses. They can close their nostrils and breathe through their mouth. They have cush pads. Like it's the list is never fucking ending. Their urine is some of the cleanest on the fucking planet. Like their poop can be used to fucking kindle fire, dude. Like,
oh, I got one more question for you, because I know we're getting to the end.
Yeah.
Here. Have you ever heard of people eating poop to make their body feel better? And if so, what are the parasite repercussions of
That's a really good question. I actually have not heard of people eating the camel poop, but we do no pun intended, transplants. Like if a camel is sick, we'll sometimes take rumen contents like from another
fecal
healthy camel, and
transplants.
we'll put that
Yep.
into them.
Okay.
Or also
Heard of
fecal
that.
transplants. So maybe there's something along those lines that we're talking about. But as far as the ramifications of if humans were to do that, um, I would say most of the parasites that camels get would not be able to survive for long inside of a human's body. So we would most likely just process those parasites and poop them out. Um, However, if there are other odds and ends in that camel, then you could get
Mm-hmm.
very sick, whether that be cryptosporidium
Yeah.
or
Oof.
salmonella or E. coli
You know,
types.
from
But
what I know, camel poop is one of the first quote unquote probiotics ever attempted in history.
Interesting. So, I actually just barely partnered with a PhD study in Oklahoma where they are testing a lot of the different bacterial and also fungi
Mm-hmm.
properties in camel poop. And I believe their goal has something to do with biofuels and that whole industry. I'm not really sure how that works. All I know is I'm sending them poop that we get. So between my parasite study and their study on bacteria and fungi, I think we're going to learn a lot, and we might be able to come up with certain probiotic things. I
Awesome.
don't know, but
That
that
would be
sounds really
super cool.
interesting.
I sound crazy when I talk to the average person about it, but I really do feel that camels are kind of an answer to the lot of problems that we have in the human society, and one of these examples I talk about all the time is camel milk, and I'm sure you know all about the fascinating benefits of camel milk. Do you suspect a lot of these things to be true, or do you think camel milk's kind of bullshit?
I've read several studies on camel milk, and I I truly do think that camel milk is pretty
Mm-hmm.
magical. They've isolated these insulin-like proteins in camel milk that, if taken appropriately, may be able to help people that have diabetes take less insulin. And I know that camel milk is lower in lactose compared to a lot of other milks. So even those who are lactose intolerant may still be able to enjoy camel milk. And there's even a book that I'm sure you're aware of called Camel
Yep.
Crazy, where it shares a story of a boy with autism whose symptoms were alleviated after having camel milk. And so there are a lot of cool studies out there, and I think a lot of them hold some merit. And in other countries overseas, there are camel dairies next door to human hospitals, and they use camel milk in a lot of treatment protocols for the humans. And I find a lot of truth to it. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it is tradition as well. But I think we're just breaking the tip of the iceberg as far as what camel milk can do for people.
Well, the
Absolutely.
government might be coming after you after that. So you just want to keep your eyes
There was a billboard about
open.
5 minutes down the road on the freeway by us that somebody put up probably, I don't know, about 2 years ago now, and it was a picture of a camel, and it said camel milk question mark, good for you and your pets. But there was no website
Oh,
link, there was no ranch on it, there was nothing on it. So to this day we have no idea who put it there.
really? And it's so
I
close
have a
to you.
picture of it somewhere. I was actually going to post it in the Cameleers Facebook page to see if like anybody had some kind of information on it. But yeah, nothing. It's
Hmm.
just down the freeway. There's nothing. We don't have any camel dairies here in Wisconsin that I know of. And like dude,
Hmm.
it's somebody was like, we're gonna get the message started in Wisconsin, and I have no idea who fucking put it there,
Or they're trolling.
or they're trolling me. But
That's crazy. There was a guy that reached out to me last year who seemed to be more of like a commercial camel milk dealer. Like he was talking to me about potentially coming to some of our clinics and selling milk at our clinics and whatnot. So maybe it was his business because he seemed to be doing a lot of outreach with
the
camel
my
milk.
thing about it though, which maybe you're correct, maybe it is him. My thing about it, if you're trying to sell the camel milk, why wasn't there a business on the
Give us something,
billboard?
man.
Like there is no linking on it.
That's
There is nothing to it. Just saying, "Hey,
really weird.
camel milk's good for you."
Yeah,
You know?
and I dig it.
Hmm.
I want to do
Yeah,
it.
it was awesome, but I don't know. It's just like if you want me to put a billboard up that says capybara on count is here, but not tell them where.
Right?
Like, I don't know. It was
Yeah,
strange. I'll have to dig that photo out. I don't know where the fuck
I
it
might
is in
have
my
it too.
phone. You might, yeah. I'll have to dig it out. But they put it within, kind of an odd area. I mean, the freeway is the freeway. I mean, there's cars everywhere. But like the billboard is probably an hour from Chicago and 40 minutes from Illinois. So, or not Illinois, from
hmm,
Milwaukee. So like it's in the middle of like the most dead area they could have chosen. So it's very strange, but whatever. I'm for it. I got to see a camel for like the billboard was up for like 2 years, dude. It was up for a
No, it's a couple
while.
months.
No, that was there for a while, at
I got it.
least a year, the minimum of a year. That billboard
Absolutely
was there for a while. I drive the freeway with the camels every fucking day. Don't tell me.
All right, dude.
That was there forever, man. But it was definitely fucking interesting, man. But yeah, super cool to hear your
cool.
opinion on it. I've heard of the book Camel Crazy. I've never read it. The story of helping autism, that's the one I've been the most skeptical on, and I would be super intrigued. To see that study happen more. I should read the book and order it, because that is like that one to me is just kind of the biggest thing they could use the milk for. Like that is an incredible advancement, you know. And it's, I don't know if you saw the post I put on Facebook last week about the USDA and other milks and animals and stuff. And I truly believe that they're trying to keep camel milk out of here because it's going to solve a lot of medical problems, you know. Absolutely.
Mhm. No, I think a lot of our issues in America stem from inflammation in the body. And so that can come from, sugars and all these other things. And all this inflammation can be started like by the gut and our
Hmm.
microbiome. And I think camel milk has some wonderful healing properties that help to realign our overall microbiome and help it be more as what it should be. And so if we can help our microbiome, that can help get rid of inflammation, which can then help almost every disease on the planet. Most diseases are the result of inflammation.
Interesting. Well, you know, hopefully camel milk will maybe rise in popularity over the next some years, which, you know, could also put a downfall on things. You know, it's going to be harder for each people. Camels are going to get more expensive. The USDA is going to regulate shit more than they already are. But, you know, I guess that's kind of a topic for the future, and we'll see where it goes. You know, things are getting regulated so heavily in so many different directions that I'm really hoping camels don't get touched much. I mean, it was only in the last, I think 2 years ago, I had to change, you know, camels as exotic on my USDA papers, you know, when my inspector finally made me do it. So, you know, I really hope people don't start cracking down on camels a little more. As far as I'm concerned, camels are one of the best, like, kind of quote unquote real estate animals you could have at this point. You know, there's not a very big loss margin when you get into them, whether you're doing rides or a dairy or whatever the fuck. They're incredibly, you know, stable animals, and there's a lot of profit behind them. So
Most
it's
definitely.
just, it's a very broad spectrum animal. You know, on the count of that too, everybody, you know, with horses being as big as they are, you know, there's people like PETA and other, you know, people who don't ride the horses, and now people are, you know, getting behind birds. So the USDA's new bird regulations, and now chimp crazy's out. So they're they're trying to get new primate acts into place. And I'm really terrified of the day where people really come after camels, because, you know, they hushed elephant rides out of most states. You know, there's very few people that do elephant rides anymore. And what's next, man? You know, the camel is next, man. You know, it's horses, camels, and elephants that do the most rides. We used to do llama rides here. They were terrible because the llama would sit down when you put 10 pounds on it. But it's
It was
camel
unique.
rides. It was unique. We might have a couple llama saddles left here. I don't think so, but we might. Could make one. It's just it's a strange world, man. But, you know, without further ado, we'll let you go. We'll stop wasting your afternoon here with a bunch of fucking hubbaloo, man. We
No, this
we
has been
really
fun.
appreciate you coming on. You know, we'd really definitely love to have you back. This has been a good time. This is probably the most informative episode we've had so far.
1000%.
You know, the goal of the podcast is to inform people on animals. We talk about, you know, a lot about government regulations and bullshit like that, but we try to offer perspectives of what's going on in the exotic animal community from people that aren't fucking PETA on the streets. You know, that's all I hear about on the internet is the bullshit. You know, people don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So we really appreciate you you know, coming on and really giving us some knowledge, especially a lot about the fecals and your training and where you come from. Before we let you go, Nick, is there any kind of just miscellaneous thoughts you want the world to hear? By the world, I mean 20 people.
No, I mean, I just really appreciate this opportunity. I think every platform is a really great way to educate people and to help people understand how truly amazing animals can be. I mean, I love to educate. I'm an animal advocate. That's different from an animal
Yes.
rights activist, but really and truly, I'm here for the animals. And so, if I can make an animal's life better by either providing for them directly or by educating the owner better. I mean, I think I've done my job. So I think this was a really great opportunity just to further get the message out there, and I think you guys are doing an awesome job.
Yeah, definitely thank you, because what I've always noticed is it was pretty much what I've just said. Is, everything you see online is like, oh no, when you shear sheep, they become a bloody pulp, and I'm like, that's bullshit, dude. Like, that's all you see on Facebook. So I was like, let's start this podcast from the view of people that actually work with animals, and we're very honest. I don't know if you did, go through any of the episodes or not, or like chime in at all, but we're super honest. Like, if somebody that, down the road did something terrible to an animal, we'll talk about it. We don't hide the bad shit in the animal industry, but we're trying to gain the trust of, the average viewer. The bad things happen, whether it's in the captivity or the wild. Accidents happen, and we're here to talk about the good and the bad of it. So it's definitely been a good opportunity to talk to people about it. But, the goal is, at the end of the day, is to make sure that people don't think people with animals are all bad people. And they shouldn't think that we're bad people. Let me tell you why. Because when I have a fucking problem, I can contact people like Nick to fix my animal. See, we have help for our fucking animals. We're not stupid. Maybe I'm stupid, but Nick's not. And that's why my camels are alive. But help. Anyway, man, without further ado, we really appreciate you on. It has been just a fucking great episode. We definitely hope to have you back, man. And without further ado, Fluffy,
all hail the Poop King, and happy hump day, everybody.